This is a self-guided bike tour I took in August of 2022. It was 6 days and 410 miles. The weather was dry and warm in the 60s and 80s, except for the last day when it was in the 90s. I sort of used adventure cycle route from Chicago to New York by way of Xenia, Ohio, but it's more of a concept than a route. There were problems with sketchy neighborhoods. The route bypasses some natural areas and cuts away from Lake Michigan early. So I created a route using Ride with GPS Route Planner and their heat map. And for points of interest, I checked the Indiana bird trails and the book Roadside Geology of Indiana by Mark Camp. So day one, 10 miles, sunny and warm. The official start of the ride is from Chicago to New York route is at Buckingham Fountain. So I started from the Oak Park Administration Building. I rode almost entirely on Washington Avenue. There were a couple of sketchy neighborhoods, but the streets were wide and no one bothered me. There were some interesting churches and the large Garfield Park. I ended up at the Bean. So day one continued. This was 54 miles, still sunny and warm. This is from Chicago to Dinwiddie, Indiana. And I was on the trails, the Lakefront Trail, the Wolf Lake Trail, and the Erie-Lackawanna Trail. The towns were Hammond, Maryville, Crown Point, and Dinwiddie. This section goes from urban to suburban to rural, has great views of Lake Michigan, and then climbs gently. I deviated from the adventure cycle route to spend more time along Lake Michigan and then rode the Wolf Lake Trail and the Erie-Lackawanna Trails. I had my one and only flat on the trip on the Erie-Lackawanna Trail at I-80. And I stayed at a nice Super 8 in Dinwiddie and got dinner from the Denny's next door. This is day 2. This is 51 miles. It was sunny and warm, going from Dinwiddie to Tippecanoe State Park. There's some neat features on this ride. Grand Kankakee State County Park, Stroudsburg Nature Preserve, Jasper Pulaski Wildlife Area, Winnemac Wildlife Area, and Tippecanoe State Park. I completely deviated from the adventure cycle route to see some nature. There were no towns today. This route passes through the former Grand Kankakee Marsh, once called the Everglades of the North. Sadly, the Kankakee River is nothing but a straight as an arrow canal now. But the drainage canal still had herons and egrets. Stroudsburg Nature Preserve is a black oak savanna with tall oaks and summer flowers. Jasper Pulaski Wildlife Area is famous as a sandhill crane migration stop, but there's no sandhill cranes in August. Winnemac and Tippecanoe preserve bottomland along the Tippecanoe River, and I camped at Tippecanoe. This is day 3, 64 miles. Warm and overcast. Went from Tippecanoe State Park to Mississinewa State Park. So today's trail was the Nickel Plate Trail. And some towns I went through was Bruce Lake, Rochester, and Peru. I again deviated from the adventure cycle route and headed due east from Tippecanoe State Park to Rochester, where I picked up the Nickel Plate Trail to Peru. Then I rode beside the Mississinewa River to Mississinewa Park, where I camped. In Bruce Lake, there was a recreation of a historic gas station with pumps and architecture. And at the Rochester Courthouse was a memorial to the Potawatomi Indians who passed through the town in 1834 during the Trail of Death. Day 4, 94 miles. It was warm and sunny. This is from Mississinewa Park to Richmond, Indiana. Today's trails were Converse Junction, Sweetser Switch, and the Cardinal Greenway. Towns were Converse Junction, Sweetser, Marion, Jonesboro, Muncie, and Richmond. It was a long day, 94 miles, but much of it was on trails, so it wasn't terribly difficult. Besides, there was a paucity of accommodations between Muncie and Richmond. The Cardinal Trail is a real gem, about 60 miles of towns and rural scenery. I stayed at the Red Roof Inn of Richmond and walked next door to Myers for a chicken dinner. This is day 5, 77 miles. Another warm and sunny day. Richmond, Indiana to Xenia, Ohio. Today's trails were the Wolf Creek, Mad River, and Creekside trails, and a little bit of the Little Miami River. Towns were Richmond, Lewisburg, Ohio, Brookville, Dayton, Beaver Creek, and Xenia. This was another longish day at 77 miles. Not far out of Richmond was a shrine to an unfortunate young woman who died in a car crash just days before her 17th birthday. After that were 3 dogs that tried to encircle me, but fortunately their owner chased them away. The last bit of the Wolf Creek Trail in Dayton is like riding through a concrete-lined ditch. And it was closed at the Great Miami River, but fortunately no one was working on Saturday. It was starting to get hot by the time I got to Xenia, and I stopped at a Wendy's for a strawberry frosty. I camped at Robert's Rustic Retreat, a hip camp south of Xenia, and just a half a mile off the Little Miami Bike Trail. Day 6, 55 miles, hot and sunny. Xenia, Ohio to Cincinnati. Towns were Spring Valley, Corwin, Morrow, Loveland, and Cincinnati. And it was all on the Little Miami Trail. Aside from the last 10 miles home, this was all on the Little Miami Trail. And I biked this so many times I didn't even bother with the GPS. The trail was closed at Grandin Road due to construction at the cartridge factory, but no one was working on Sunday, so I saved a big climb. It was hot, but the trail is mostly shady. Unfortunately, there was no place that was open until I got to Remington, where I stopped at a UDF to enjoy some air conditioning and a milkshake. And I finally arrived home at 3 p.m. after 6 days and 410 miles.